And thank you for tuning in for the annual Child and Adult Care Food Program training for child care providers participating in the CACFP under the sponsorship of Catholic Charities Maine. I'm Kim Dumont, and we have a lot packed into this training, so let's get started. Each year, we are required to offer training on specific topics. It's a refresher to ensure all child care providers and CACFP staff remember and understand the rules and regulations that are involved in the CACFP participation. This training session will meet the requirement for the 2022-2023 agreement year. The required training topics are meal pattern requirements, including serving sizes, meal counts, claim submission, site review procedures, record keeping, and the reimbursement system. We will also be discussing creditable foods, specifically how to identify whole grain rich foods, the sugar limits for cereals and yogurts, milk requirements, which foods require CN labels if you serve them, and the new way of crediting grains using the ounce equivalence method. We'll talk about the childcare staff training requirement and include the annual civil rights training with a short quiz to follow. Catholic Charities Maine (CACFP) follows federal guidelines and requirements. All CACFP sponsors are required to follow specific procedures and adhere to specific deadlines. We do not require anything more of our providers under our sponsorship than what is absolutely necessary. Healthcare providers participating in CACFP are required to attend or receive training on all aspects of the program annually. Childcare providers are required to ensure their staff is also trained regarding CACFP requirements. If you have staff who may be left in charge of your program in your absence, you must ensure they are trained in the CACFP requirements, know how to complete CACFP menus, meal counts, and daily attendance, know where all of your CACFP paperwork is posted and filed in the event your CACFP monitor, a state CACFP representative, or a USDA representative were to visit. Have your staff complete this training to meet their training requirement. Begin with the meal pattern for infants and children. There are limited restrictions for meal times. They should be reasonable in length, allowing for children to eat in a relaxed environment. They should fall within the traditional mealtime time frame and should allow enough time between meals. The state CACFP office requires at least 2 hours between the end of one meal or snack and the beginning of the next. This helps to ensure that children have some active playtime, and are not just kind of eating their way through the day. It helps children learn to identify when they're hungry and should eat. Children are more likely to eat lunch or dinner if they haven't been filling up on snacks so close to a mealtime. Another thing to remember in regard to meal times is that any changes must be reported to our office because we cannot reimburse for a meal that has not been approved. Infants have their own meal pattern requirements and serving sizes, which are different than the meal pattern for children ages 1 year and older. You can see the infant meal pattern is also broken down into 2 different age ranges, birth through 5 months and 6 months through 11 months. This slide shows what is required for infants at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack time. For an infant 5 months and younger, only fluid breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula is required. Infants 6 months and up and until they turn 12 months old require 3 components at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those are breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula and iron-fortified infant cereal or an infant creditable meat or meat alternate such as whole egg or yogurt, and also a fruit or a vegetable. Iron-fortified infant cereal is one of the required components for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But this might also be a time when you choose to serve the older infant an infant creditable meat or meat alternate, such as cheese, cottage cheese, cooked or dry beans or peas, or yogurt instead. We've seen providers serving items such as ready-to-eat cereal, toast, and pancakes, pasta, or breads to older infants at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. While it's understandable that an older infant, may show signs that they're ready for, or their parents may want them to have these types of foods because the older children are having them, ready-to-eat cereal, pasta, and bread items are not creditable for infants at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. If you serve them, you must also serve iron-fortified infant cereal or a creditable infant meat or meat alternate. If you choose to serve those foods and not the iron-fortified infant cereal or a creditable meat or meat alternate, you cannot claim the meal for that infant. The infant snack meal pattern is also slightly different than that of the breakfast and lunch or dinner meal pattern for infants. While there are still 3 required components for developmentally ready infants, the grain component may include bread, crackers, or iron-fortified infant cereal, or ready-to-eat cereal at snack time. Snacks are the only meals where substituting bread, crackers, or ready-to-eat cereals are creditable for infants. Notice there's also a range of serving sizes for the younger infants and the older infants. That's because we know infants transition to solid foods. An infant who is just beginning to try solid foods may only take 1 or 2 tablespoons of a food, or none at all, as compared to a 10 or 11-month-old who may want the full minimum serving and then some. Transitioning usually takes place around 6 to 7 months age range, and some signs an infant is developmentally ready to try solid foods are if they're able to sit in a chair with good head control, opening their mouth for food, moving food from the spoon to the throat, and when they have doubled in weight. We also know parents are in charge. So if a parent is not allowing their infant to be served a particular required food, such as iron-fortified infant cereal, you should work with them to determine what creditable infant meat or meat alternate would be acceptable for you to serve to their infant in order to be able to claim the infant's meal. Infant meal pattern requirements allows for reimbursement of meals when a mother breastfeeds her infant on site. Infants must be served breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula. Yogurt and whole eggs are allowable meat alternates. Yogurt may contain no more than 23 grams of total sugars per 6-ounce serving. Breads, crackers, and ready-to-eat cereals, such as Cheerios, may be served as the grain requirement at snack time only. Ready-to-eat cereals may contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce, no more than 0.212 grams total sugars per 100 grams of dry cereal. Remember, vegetables and/or fruit, or a combination of the two, must be served at all meals and snacks for infants that are developmentally ready to accept them. And again, that's usually around 6 months of age. A serving of grains must be whole grain rich, enriched meal, or enriched flour. But there is no whole grain rich requirement for infants as there is for the older children. If you care for infants in your program and participate in CACFP, you must offer the program to the infants. Infants cannot be excluded from CACFP if you are participating with older children. You must offer a house brand of iron-fortified infant formula, and parents may choose to accept that for their infant or bring their own. Parents may supply only 1 infant creditable food item for you to still be able to claim the infant's meal. 3 most common errors we see regarding infant meals are: 1, providers serving a bread item such as bread, ready-to-eat pancakes at breakfast without serving an iron-fortified infant cereal or creditable infant meat or meat alternate. The second one, providers serving bread, pasta, crackers without serving iron-fortified infant cereal or creditable infant meat or meat alternate at breakfast or lunch or dinner. And the last one is providers only serving 2 of the 3 required components to infants at snack time. Remember, menu documentation for infants must include the specific food served to each infant for each meal or snack component, the amounts of breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula and food served, not the amounts consumed. This can be done on a single menu or 2 different documents. Soy-based, low lactose, and lactose-free iron-fortified infant formulas regulated by the FDA are allowed, and no doctor's note is required. Regulated by the FDA means it must be made in the U.S. Final points while we're on the topic of infants. Just as they transition into solid foods, they may need to transition out of formula or breast milk. So there's a 1 month period from when the infant turns 12 months until they turn 13 months to help them become accustomed to unflavored whole milk. During this period, both unflavored whole milk and iron-fortified infant formula may be served. If a parent asks you to serve formula after the child reaches 13 months, a milk substitution form would be required. A parent may request breast milk to be served for as long as they wish, and a doctor's note is never required for serving breast milk. Remember to keep in mind the developmental readiness of infants as they transition to solid foods during that 6 to 11 month period, and as they move into the child meal pattern at 12 months then beyond. Infants and young children are at a high risk for choking on foods. All foods given to infants and young children must be of a size, shape, and texture appropriate for the age and development of the infant or the young child. Foods must be cut into small pieces no larger than a ½ inch or cut lengthwise into thin slices. Adults should always supervise participants, especially infants, during meals and snack times. So let's talk about the meal pattern for children. This is broken down by age ranges and offers the correct minimum servings for the different ages. It's just as important to take notice of the required minimum serving sizes as it is to ensure you are serving the required components. We'll talk more about using the new ounce equivalents for crediting grains a little bit later in the presentation. All 3 components must be served at breakfast: fluid milk and fruit or vegetable and grain or bread. Milk. Children ages 1 year must be served unflavored whole milk. Children ages 2 to 5 years must be served unflavored fat-free skim or low-fat 1% milk. Flavored milk must be skim and may not be served to children younger than 6 years old. A dietary restrictions and substitutions statement is required for a meal to be reimbursed when cow's milk is being substituted with a non-dairy beverage due to a medical disability. Pasteurized full-strength juice may be used to meet the fruit or vegetable requirement once per day, including snack times. At least 1 serving of a whole grain-rich item must be served daily. Meat or meat alternates may be used to meet the grain requirement at breakfast up to 3 times per week. Breakfast cereals may contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce to be creditable and be whole grain rich or enriched or fortified with vitamins and minerals. Slide shows the 5 components with the minimum serving sizes for each component that must be served at lunch and dinner. Remember, nuts and seeds may only make up 50% of a serving of meat or meat alternate. An additional meat or meat alternate will have to be served and noted on the menu. All 5 components must be served at lunch and supper: fluid milk, meat or meat alternate, vegetable, fruit, and a grain or bread. In regard to the vegetable, 2 different vegetable servings may be offered instead of a serving of a fruit and a serving of a vegetable. Children ages 1 year must be served unflavored whole milk. Children ages 2 to 5 years must be served unflavored fat-free skim or low-fat 1% milk. Flavored milk must be skim and may not be served to children younger than 6 years old. A dietary restrictions and substitution statement is required for a meal to be reimbursed when cow's milk is being substituted with a non-dairy beverage due to a medical disability. Meat or meat alternates. Yogurts may contain no more than 23 grams of total sugars per 6-ounce serving. And you'll want to remember to supplement peanut butter with additional meat or meat alternate. Creditable cheeses, such as natural, low-fat, or reduced-fat cheeses like cheddar, Swiss, Colby, and Monterey Jack cheese, cheese spreads, cottage cheese, and ricotta are all creditable cheeses. Non-creditable cheeses would be products labeled as imitation cheese, cheese products, cheese whips, and cream cheese. You'll also see the serving sizes for grains, and the meal pattern is now measured in ounce equivalents. And we'll talk more about using ounce equivalents for measuring grains a little later in the training. Right now, let's focus on fruits and vegetables and grains. For For fruits, pasteurized full-strength juice may be used to meet the fruit or vegetable component once a day, including snack time. And serving 2 servings of 2 different vegetables may be served at lunch and supper instead of offering a serving of fruit. Breakfast cereals may contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce to be creditable and be whole grain rich or enriched fortified with vitamins and minerals, and at least 1 serving of a whole grain rich item must be served daily. Regarding the fruit and vegetable portion of the child meal pattern, one thing to note is that for younger children, ages 1 to 2 and 3 to 5 years, the serving sizes for vegetables and fruits are the same amount. So when you look at the serving sizes of those same components for the older children, you can see the serving size for vegetables is more than what's required for fruits. Also, if you choose to offer servings of 2 different vegetables for lunch or dinner, you could serve one as the smaller fruit size serving. And an example of that would be like the 1/2 cup of green beans and 1/4 cup of carrots for children 6 to 12 years old. This is the meal pattern for child snacks. You must select 2 of the 5 components to make it a reimbursable snack. And one thing to notice is the serving size for the components are not exactly the same. They may be greater than or less than what is required for a serving size at breakfast, lunch, or dinner. For instance, 1 to 2-year-olds are only required to be served a 1/2 ounce of cheese at snack time compared to the 1 ounce of cheese required at lunch or dinner. If you don't have a copy of the meal pattern requirements for infants and children, you should. Reach out to your monitor and they will be more than happy to send you the link to print your own or send you a copy. Post it on the fridge or tape it to the inside of your pantry or cupboard door. It should be available for you and anyone preparing meals and snacks so that everyone knows what components should be served and the minimum amounts to serve. Remember, serve 2 of the 5 components for a reimbursable snack. Only 1 of the 2 components may be a beverage, and water should be served at snack when milk or juice is not being served. The same requirements for milk types by age and sugar limits for cereal and yogurts apply to snacks as well. The question asking what foods could be substituted as a meat or meat alternate at breakfast was one of the questions that was most often missed on the training quiz for the last 2 years. So this year I want to again remind you, cream cheese is not a creditable food for any meal or for any age group in CACFP. Other non-creditable foods include cheese product, processed cheese food, cream cheese, bacon, potato chips, sticks or puffs, corn or tortilla chips unless they're made with whole corn or enriched corn flour, condiments such as jams, jellies, preserves, barbecue sauce, ketchup, and mustard, grain-based desserts like chocolate chip or chocolate chip muffins, donuts, cookies, cereal bars, granola bars, ice cream, frozen yogurt, commercially made chicken nuggets, and fish sticks or fish nuggets unless you have a CN label. Those are all non-creditable foods for children 1 year and older. So let's talk about the milk requirements for children of all ages, starting with infants birth through 11 months, who require breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula. Children 12 months to 2 years old require 4 ounces of fluid milk served for all meals and snacks. That milk should be unflavored whole cow's milk. And just remember that transitioning infants have a 1-month window where they may be served breast milk or a combination of breast milk and unflavored whole cow's milk. Children 2 to 5 years old require 6 ounces of fluid milk served at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 4 ounces served at snack. That milk should be unflavored fat-free skim or 1% cow's milk. And also there are some creditable soy milks available. Children 6+ years require at least 8-ounce serving at all meals and snacks. And that milk should be unflavored fat-free skim or 1% cow's milk. flavored, fat-free skim cow's milk, or creditable soy milks. The updated milk policy and milk substitutions minimum nutrition requirements can be found at the Catholic Charities Maine website, and that is ccmaine.org/child adult care food program, and then look for it underneath the CACFP forms and resources link on the right-hand side of the page. There are some times we may not be serving cow's milk to a child, and we would need documentation allowing this. As an example, if a parent has a child who follows a vegan diet, the parent can submit a written request to the child care provider asking that soy milk be served in lieu of cow's milk. The written request must identify the medical or other special dietary need that restricts the diet of the child. It's at the caregiver's discretion to provide a non-dairy substitute if it is not related to a medical disability. All non-dairy milk substitutes are at the expense of the caregiver and/or the child's parent or guardian. If a parent provides a non-dairy milk substitute that meets the nutritional standards as outlined in CFR 210.10M3, and that has been approved by the state agency, the caregiver may serve the non-dairy milk substitute and still claim reimbursement for that meal. At this point, the only time a meal would be reimbursable when oat, almond, rice, or coconut milk is served is when there is a milk substitutions and dietary restrictions form completed, signed, and on file in our office. This is the dietary restrictions and substitution statement. It's being shown side by side to fit on this screen. Dietary restrictions and substitution statements must be on file in our office. The following statement is for the USDA programs, including Child and Adult Care Food Program. USDA Regulation CFR Part 15B requires substitutions or modifications in school program meals for children whose disabilities defined below restrict their diets. A child with a disability must be supplied substitutions in food when that need is supported by a signed statement by a licensed physician. Food allergies, which may result in severe life-threatening anaphylactic reaction, also meet the definition of a disability, and the substitutions prescribed by the licensed physician medical authority would be made. A disability is a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more of an individual's major life activities. And a major life activity is, as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act Amendment Acts, caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, working, and major bodily functions. And a major bodily function is having been defined as functions of the immune system, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, cardiovascular, endocrine, and reproductive functions. Maximum meal count per child per day would be 2 meals and 1 snack, or 2 snacks and 1 meal. Providers may claim anything less than the maximum meal count per child per day. Your planned menu must be posted at least daily before the start of business. Any changes should be noted as they occur. Meals will be disallowed if your menu is not posted when a monitor, state, or USDA representative arrives for a review. Meal counts must be recorded by the end of the day. Meal counts must be recorded at the point of service if on a corrective action plan or if you have more than 12 children enrolled. Meal counts can be recorded in computer or on paper, even as a separate count on your daily attendance. Meal counts must be documented, and you must be able to produce them during a review visit. Meals will be disallowed if your meal counts are not recorded by the end of the day. You may not claim over your license capacity unless you're offering a second serving or shift, or you're claiming your own children. The Child and Adult Care Food Program does not allow providers to claim meals as a result of a permitted licensing overage. Offering the same meal or snack at 2 separate times to separate children is serving a second serving or a shift, even if you're not over licensed capacity. Child and staff ratios are taken into consideration. Childcare staff or helpers must be listed in the system to ensure correct ratios and meal reimbursement. You'll need to contact our office with childcare staff information when making staff additions or changes. Contacting our office is very important because our software will disallow meals when we process your claim if we don't have your staff information. Please be sure your claim is received in the office by the 6th of the month in order to be considered on time and allow enough time for CACFP staff to process them for timely payment. Please be sure to review food served, meals claimed, and the attendance before clicking to submit. And all notes regarding unusual attendance, provider closures, open on a holiday, terminations, should all be noted in the calendar. Your screen should change to green to let you know you've submitted your claim to the sponsor. And then please notify the office if you have computer problems or are unable to submit your claim and need assistance. Always remember to check your error reports. Mistakes do happen, such as when an enrollment form is not received. This is a habit providers who submit their claims electronically should get into. Look at your error report by the 13th of the month. Contact the office, not your monitor, with any questions about claim errors. If you find an error by the 13th of the month, it may be possible for us to make a correction before completing our claim process. If you don't check your error report until you receive your payment, it may be too late to correct any errors. We have a limited amount of time to process, submit, and revise claims. Be careful and be proactive when submitting your claim. Monitors are required to visit at least 3 times a year, and 2 of those 3 visits must be unannounced. One of the unannounced visits must be a meal or snack observation. Our monitors will provide photo ID. They'll check for your approved license or current voucher documentation if you're legally exempt. They will observe required posted notices, such as the Building for the Future poster and the current WIC eligibility information, to make sure that those are posted for parents to view. They'll be checking your training attendance, that a whole grain is served during at least 1 meal or snack. They'll also be checking that you are using the ounce equivalence for crediting grains method to credit serving sizes of grains. Monitors have been checking ounce equivalent serving sizes during the CACFP desk audits since last July. And we have been providing technical assistance and support as needed. We are also required to disallow meals due to improper serving sizes of grains. That began in January of 2023. Our monitors will be examining menus, daily attendance, meal counts, child enrollments. Be aware of possible deductions for missing menus or missing meal counts. And beginning October 1st, 2022, monitors began completing the 5-day reconciliation forms again. That's where we're looking at your meal counts and your daily attendance time in and out compared to your child enrollment forms to make sure that all of that is matching. You should have received the updated WIC information and income eligibility guidelines, as well as a new copy of the Building for the Future posters in the mail at the beginning of July. Please be sure you have correctly dated WIC poster and Building for the Future copies posted for all parents and monitors and state CACFP and USDA representatives to view if they were to pop in. The current copy should show the effective dates of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024 for the WIC information. If you need a new copy, you can print one from our website, ccmaine.org/child and adult care food program, or you can contact your monitor and ask them to send another one. Beginning October 1st, 2022, we were again required to complete the 5-day reconciliation forms. A 5-day reconciliation consists of a review of meal counts, daily attendance, and child enrollments for the day the monitor is reviewing. And they're going to compare that against a consecutive 5-day period and note any discrepancies or questions that they might have. Monitors are required to follow up on any discrepancies found. They may be asking some questions about your attendance or meal counts. Sometimes we have to use household contacts to determine if an error has occurred. So it's important to make sure that your child and parent contact information is up to date. Providers must provide copies of menus with meal counts, daily attendance, including time in and out, and the child enrollment forms for all children enrolled when monitors, state, or USDA representatives arrive for a review. Talk a little bit about record keeping and what is needed as proof of compliance. And we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about menus, meal counts, and daily attendance, child enrollment forms, household contacts, notification of availability, and CACFP paperwork. Menus must be posted or visible at least daily before the start of business. Bulletin board, whiteboard, sign-in clipboard, those are all areas where you can post or make your menus visible for parents. This can be done daily, it can be done weekly, or it can be done monthly. But be sure to document any changes as soon as they occur. And remember to identify your whole grain item of the day on your menu as well. Meal counts must be documented at the point of service, at least by the end of the day for providers with less than 12 children enrolled. If you have more than 12 children enrolled in your program, you must document their meals at the point of service or when you serve the meal. Infant menus must be posted or visible if you're caring for infants. Remember, it's mandatory to offer and provide infant meals if you care for infants in your program and participate in CACFP. You must offer an iron-fortified infant formula for parents to accept or decline. Daily attendance is required. Providers must track time in and out for each child in care each day. Talk with your monitor for attendance templates if you'd like to see another option. Remember, you must have a way to document your meal served. If you use a whiteboard to post your menu for your parents, you will still need to have a paper or electronic copy of the food served on file. Meal counts must be documented at the point of service during or immediately after the meal takes place if you serve more than 12 children. The child enrollment form is another record that must be kept on file. They include the child's name and date of birth, attendance, days and times in care, meals served to the children, all parent contact information, infant information such as the type of formula offered and the infant bubble, school information if the child is of school age, race and ethnicity information. Remember, if a parent does not enter information for race and ethnicity, you can ask them if they want to do that before submitting it, but you cannot add the information for them if it is missing. In the past, we were asked to do that, but that policy has changed, and we are no longer allowed to enter race or ethnicity information if it is missing on an enrollment form. Both parent and provider signatures are mandatory and is date sensitive. June is currently the month for annual child re-enrollments, and enrollments are good for 1 year. Should update any information that has changed on their enrollment form, and it's the provider's responsibility to have parents complete new enrollment forms or sign and date the re-enrollment forms and submit them to the CACFP office by the required deadlines. We try our best to provide reminders, but can't guarantee that that will always happen. Catholic Charities Maine CACFP is required to have current household contacts on file for each child being served. We're required to have current addresses and telephone numbers for parents of participating children. We're required to contact families during the year when necessary. We'll reach out to parents periodically to verify attendance and satisfaction. Household contacts are typically completed by a survey, either in writing or by telephone. Just as you do, we also run on a very tight budget. Please help us by notifying us when you are or will be closed. Providers must notify the sponsor of days their facility will not be open. This includes closures due to illness, vacation, or weather. Call the office or call, text, or email your monitor. Even better, use your kid care calendar to mark your program as closed for the day or the week, etc. Notifications of vacation should be done in advance, not at the end of the month on the CIF. Meals will be disallowed if a monitor visits at a mealtime and no one is home. So why is this important? It's important because the USDA requires sponsors to follow up when visits are attempted but no one is home. Our monitors schedule visits in advance and would be able to rearrange visits if we knew you wouldn't be home. Incomplete visits are expensive. It's costing us in monitors time as well as unnecessary mileage. We are often asked, what paperwork do we have to keep on file and how long do we have to keep it? You'll need to provide documentation of current license or approval, claim documentation, including menus, child enrollment forms, daily record of number of children in attendance, daily records of the number of meals by type served to enrolled children, and how long do you have to keep that paperwork? Claim documentation must be kept for 3 years after the date of the last claim submitted or the fiscal year to which they pertain. The current month plus the previous 12 months of records, or a total of 13 months, must be kept on site in the home. Records can be a hard copy or an electronic format, provided they are readily available. Providers may store the second and third past years off-site, but they must be in the provider's control and the provider must be able to produce them within a reasonable amount of time. Ask your monitor for support and suggestions on how to organize your CACFP paperwork if you're feeling out of sorts. Our monitors have been providers themselves and or monitors for a very long time and have some great suggestions to help. Remember, this is all documentation your monitor, the state CACFP representative, or the USDA official will be asking to see when they come to complete your review. Here's the timeline for the reimbursement system. Providers track meals, take accurate meal counts, and daily attendance throughout the month. After the last day of the month, the provider reviews their claim and submits it electronically, or reviews the scannable menus for completeness, signs and dates each menu, then mails the menus to the CACFP office. Menus must be received in our office by the 6th of the month in order to guarantee on-time payment. Monitors review and double-check scannable menus or electronic menus are processed through Minute Menu Kid Care software and then double-checked. CACFP staff process and submit monthly claims to the state, usually around the 15th of the month, depending on when that 15th falls in the month. The state CACFP office approves and processes our claim for payment. The state CACFP office sends payment to Catholic Charities Maine. Catholic Charities Maine has 5 business days to pay providers for the approved creditable meals claimed. It's important for providers to submit their paperwork and claims in a timely manner in order to receive payments in a timely manner. If your paperwork is late, your payment may be late. CACFP sponsors have a limited time to submit claims to the state and be paid. Claims must be submitted within 60 days from the last day of the month claimed. So for example, June claims must be submitted to the state no more than 60 days from June 30th. If a provider submits a claim after that date, we can't submit it and will not be able to reimburse you for that claim. Also, keep in mind, we still have to process your claim before we can submit it to the state. We may not have time to do that if you're cutting it close. Before we move on to creditable food section of the presentation, I wanted to take a moment to talk about how we contact and share information with providers. Email is our preferred method of contact because we can reach everyone at once. It's inexpensive and it's less time consuming and there's no postal delay. You can stay connected and help us reach you by adding these email addresses to your address book as safe senders. For CACFP newsletters, and important updates at cacfp@ccmaine.org, and my email address, which is kdumond@ccmaine.org. Okay, now let's talk about what foods are creditable and how we know they're creditable. We'll talk about identifying whole grain rich foods, the sugar limits for cereals and yogurts, documentation that's required if you serve a combination food, and last but not least, the new ounce equivalents for crediting grain process that we began using in July of 2022. As someone who doesn't always love change myself, I felt your concern and for learning the new process. It sounds like most folks have been trying out this new method and are doing okay or receiving technical support. Anyway, I want to ensure you that we are here for you and we will continue sharing resources, tips, and training opportunities to make sure everyone is comfortable and confident with using the ounce equivalence method for crediting grains. Can I give you a very helpful hint right now? Go buy yourself a kitchen scale that measures ounces. This will be the easiest way of ensuring you're serving the proper amount of grains. You can find them from $10 and up. This would also be an allowable CACFP expense. Keep the receipt for your taxes. A whole grain rich food must be served to children 1 year and older once a day across all meals served. That means that you must serve a whole grain rich food during at least one meal or snack every day, but there is no whole grain requirement for infants. Any state's WIC list is the best resource for creditable whole grain rich foods, yogurts, and ready to eat cereals that meet the sugar requirements. I just Google Maine WIC food list and I find the list that way. There are 4 more ways to determine whole grain rich, and you can look for the FDA approved whole grain health claim on the label. You can read food labels. You can use the rule of 3, which uses the ingredients list. Use the manufacturer documentation or a standardized recipe. Whole grain rich means that at least half of the grains in a food are whole grain, and the rest of the grains are enriched, bran, or germ. Examples of enriched grains, bran, and germ might be enriched white flour, or oat bran, or wheat germ. Breads, pastas, rice, and tortillas on a state's WIC list are whole grain rich. However, not all cereals on the approved WIC list will be whole grain rich. You will have to read the ingredients label to determine if it's whole grain rich. We'll learn more about that when we talk about the rule of 3. Remember to identify your whole grain rich item on your menu by writing WG or WW next to that item. One way to determine if an item is whole grain rich is by an FDA approved whole grain health claim or statement. There are 2 different health claims on packages may include that would tell you it's whole grain rich. If you see one of these statements, you can be assured that the item meets the whole grain rich requirement. Those statements are diets rich in whole grain foods and other plant foods and low in total fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease and some cancers. Or it may say diets rich in whole grain foods and other plant foods and low in saturated fat and cholesterol may help reduce the risk of health disease. Using food labels to identify whole grain rich items, foods must be labeled exactly as whole wheat bread rolls buns, entire wheat bread rolls buns, graham bread rolls and buns, not graham crackers, whole wheat spaghetti, vermicelli, macaroni, and macaroni products. You can use food labels to identify if an item is whole grain rich. Certain breads and pastas that have the words whole wheat in the product name are whole grain rich, but not all of them. The following food label statements only apply for breads and pastas. You may not use these food label statements to identify items such as waffles, pancakes, crackers, etc. as being whole grain rich. A bread product that says contains or made with whole grains does not necessarily mean it's whole grain rich. You need to look at the labels, look at the ingredients list to make that determination. This particular bread example is on the main WIC food list and is whole grain rich. It says 100% whole wheat. The rule of three is another way to determine if an item is whole grain rich. Here's what we do. Ask, is a whole grain listed as the first ingredient or second ingredient after water on the food's ingredient list? And ask, are the next two grain ingredients, if present, creditable, whole or enriched grains, brands, or germs, such as whole wheat, brown rice, or wild rice, oatmeal, bulgur, whole grain corn, or quinoa? If the answer is yes, the item is whole grain rich. Before we can decide if an item is whole grain rich using the rule of three, we need to know what it is and what is not a whole grain. This is a partial list of whole grains you will recognize. Amaranth flour, brown rice flour, buckwheat flour, bulgur, corn masa, masa harina, cracked wheat, graham flour, oatmeal, instant, oats, old-fashioned, quick cooking, quinoa, sorghum flour, white whole wheat flour, whole corn, whole durum flour, whole grain corn flour, whole grain oat flour, whole grain spelt flour, whole grain wheat flour, whole grain rye flour, whole wheat flour. We also need to know what ingredients might be enriched. That's pretty easy to determine when looking at a list of ingredients. It will say enriched in front of the grain item, or it might have a list of vitamins and minerals in parentheses behind it. I've also included a list of brand and germ ingredients. So enriched grains are enriched bromated flour, enriched corn flour, enriched durum flour, enriched durum wheat flour, enriched farina, enriched rice flour, enriched rye flour, enriched wheat flour, enriched white flour, and other grains with enriched in front of it. Bran or germ ingredients would be like corn bran, oat bran, rice bran, rye bran, wheat bran, and wheat germ. Now that we know what is considered whole, enriched, or a bran germ grain ingredient, let's look at what's not creditable as a whole grain rich ingredient. If you see any of these listed as the first ingredient, the item cannot be whole grain rich. Those would be barley malt, bean flour such as soy, chickpea, lentil, legume, etc., bromated flour, corn fiber, degerminated cornmeal, durum flour, farina, malted barley flour, nut or seed flour of any kind, oat fiber, potato flour, rice flour, semolina wheat flour, white flour, yellow corn flour, and cornmeal. Let's test our knowledge with a few examples. First, we ask, is the first ingredient a whole grain? In this case, yes. Then we ask, are the second and third grain ingredients listed whole grains or enriched grains? In this case, yes, they are whole grains. Since we can answer yes to both questions, the item is whole grain rich. Let's look at another item we frequently see on menus. The list of ingredients for Nabisco Original Graham Crackers. Let's see if they're whole grain rich. We need to ask if the first grain ingredient is a whole grain. No, it's unbleached enriched flour. So we can actually stop there. These crackers are not whole grain rich, even though they are made with whole grain, which would be graham flour. Enriched flour is the first ingredient listed, so they are creditable, just not as a whole grain rich item. Ingredients are listed by weight and with the ingredient weighing the most listed first on the ingredient list. Let's do one more. This is the ingredient list for Nabisco's cinnamon flavored Teddy Grahams. Let's see if these are whole grain rich. Is the first grain ingredient a whole grain? Yes, it's graham flour. Are the second and third grain ingredients whole or enriched grains? Well, there are only two grain ingredients and the second one is enriched. So since the first ingredient is a whole grain and the second is enriched, this is a whole grain rich item. The takeaway for these two examples is that not all graham crackers are whole grain rich foods. just because they're made with gram flour. You will need to read the labels and make sure the brand you might be serving is actually whole grain. Another way to identify if your item is whole grain rich is through manufacturer documentation or standardized recipe. Proper documentation from a manufacturer or a standardized recipe may also demonstrate whole grains are primary ingredients by their weight. For example, this bread is made with 3 grain ingredients: enriched wheat flour at 40%, whole wheat flour at 30%, and whole oats at 30%. Since the combined weight of the 2 whole grain ingredients, the whole wheat and the whole oats at 60%, is greater than the enriched wheat flour at 40%, even though the enriched flour is listed as the first ingredient on the list, this bread could meet the whole grain rich criteria with proper documentation from the manufacturer or the standardized recipe. As you will remember from our meal pattern information, the sugar limits for ready-to-eat cereals are 6 grams of sugar or less per dry ounce. There are 3 ways to determine if the cereal you serve meets the sugar limit. You can choose a cereal listed on any state's WIC-approved breakfast cereal list, and similar to the CACFP, all WIC-approved breakfast cereals contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce, or that equals out to 21.2 grams of sugar per 100 grams. The second way that you can determine if your cereal meets the sugar limits is to use the table of cereal serving sizes in grams and sugar limits. This method uses the nutrition facts label and a sugar limits table to help you determine if a breakfast cereal meets the sugar limit. The third way is to follow the standard method and use the nutrition facts label of breakfast cereals to calculate the sugar content per dry ounce. This method uses the nutrition facts label and sugar limits table to help you determine if a breakfast cereal meets the sugar limit. Let's follow the steps. Step 1 is to find the serving size in grams on the nutrition facts label of the cereal box. Our nutrition facts label says our serving size is 30 grams. The second step is to find the total sugars line on the label, look at the number of grams next to sugars on the nutrition label, and our nutrition label shows 5 grams of sugar. Step 3 is to use the serving size identified in step 1 to find the serving size of your cereal in the table of cereal serving sizes in grams and sugar limits. Ours says 30 grams, so it would be the 26 to 30 grams line on the chart. Then step 4 says, in the table, look at the number to the right of the serving size amount under sugars. If your cereal has that amount of total sugar or less, your cereal meets the sugar requirement. So if we follow that line over to the corresponding sugar column, we can see we can only have up to 6 grams of sugar for our 30 gram serving size. Now look at the total sugars on our nutrition facts label, and we can see that ours has 5 grams of sugar per serving, which means the cereal meets the sugar limits. Serving sizes here refer to those found for breakfast cereals on the nutrition facts label. You'll want to see the meal patterns for serving size requirements in the CACFP. The standard method uses the nutrition facts label of the breakfast cereal to calculate the sugar content per dry ounce. Let's look at the steps. Step 1, find the serving size in grams at the top of the label. Step 2, find the total sugars line. Look at the number of grams next to the total sugar line. Step 3, divide the number of grams of total sugars by the serving sizes in grams. And step 4, if the answer is equal to or less than 0.212, then the cereal is within the required sugar limit and may be creditable in the CACFP. So in our example, we find the serving size in grams, which is 30, then look for the total grams of sugar, which is 5. 5 divided by 30 equals 0.166, which is less than 0.212, so the cereal is creditable. We must also be aware of the sugar in the yogurts we serve. If you'll remember back to the meal pattern information for infants and children, yogurt may contain no more than 23 grams of total sugars per 6-ounce serving. Let's look at the different methods we can use to ensure our yogurts meet the CACFP sugar limits. In the first method for determining if your yogurt meets the sugar limits, we will look at the serving sizes in grams located in the upper right corner of the nutrition facts label. Then we look for the total sugars listed on the label. Once we have identified those, we can look at the table of yogurt serving sizes in grams and sugar limits to find out if our yogurt meets the requirement. We can see our yogurt at 19 grams of sugar for a 6-ounce serving is less than 23 grams of sugar allowed for a 6-ounce serving. It's important to note the serving sizes here refer to those commonly found in store-bought yogurts. Homemade yogurt is not creditable in the CACFP. Sugar limits are pre-calculated and set forth by the USDA. In the next method, we first determine the serving size in ounces. Ours is 4.5 ounces. Next, we need to know what the total amount of sugar is. Our label tells us we have 16 grams of sugar. And the third step is to divide the total sugars by the serving size. In this case, we divide 16 by 4.5, which equals 3.55. And 3.55 is less than the 3.83 maximum grams of sugar allowed per 1 ounce of yogurt. So that yogurt is creditable. The final method we can use to determine if our yogurt meets the CACFP sugar limits is to use the nutrition label and the table of yogurt serving sizes in grams and sugars limits table on page 49 of the crediting handbook for the Child and Adult Care Food Program. If you don't already have this bookmarked in your favorites tab, you may want to do that right now. It's my #1 resource when I have questions about whether or not a food is creditable, or if a grain item is whole grain rich, or if a CAN label is needed for a particular item on a menu. This third method asks us to look at the serving sizes in ounces. Ours is 6 ounces. Next, we need to know the total amount of sugar in grams, and this one is 19 grams. And then finally, we look at the table of yogurt serving sizes in grams and sugar limits table, which is again found on page 49 of the crediting handbook for CACFP. And our yogurt is 6 ounces per serving. So we find that on the table, then follow it across to find out the maximum grams of sugar our 6-ounce serving is allowed to have. This tells us we could have no more than 23 grams of sugar. Our yogurt has 19 grams of sugar, which is less than the 23 grams allowed, so our yogurt is creditable. Now, all of these methods can be found in, again, my favorite resource, which is the crediting handbook for Child and Adult Care Food Program. And if you don't have it, you need to get it. So go to usda.gov. And you can find the crediting handbook there, or you can Google crediting handbook for CACFP and just bookmark it. But another thing is your monitors will be bringing you a copy when they come out to visit this summer, so you'll have your own printed copy. Need for CAN labels often brings up questions, and let's break it down. What foods require CAN label documentation? That would be any commercially prepared combination food, or in other words, any commercially prepared food that contains more than one component. Examples would be chicken nuggets, breaded fish sticks or fish nuggets, corn dogs, meatballs, cheese or meat pizza, cheese or meat burritos, beef patties, egg rolls. And who's responsible for obtaining the CAN label documentation? You are, the provider serving the food. Your monitor may be able to share information, but you are responsible for getting the CAN label if you are choosing to serve the commercially prepared food item. You must keep the CAN label on file and be able to produce it for your monitor, for the state CACFP, or the USDA representative at the time of a review. And if you don't have a CAN label for a commercially prepared food item that you're serving, it's not a reimbursable meal. So how do you get a CAN label if the product doesn't have one? You can contact the manufacturer, you can go to the USDA database, or to the USDA food buying guide, and both of those links are on the bottom of the screen. This sample CAN label. The CN label shows the meal contribution statement. They have a 6-digit product ID number with the month and the year. And there are 4 integral parts of a valid CN label. It includes the product name, the ingredient statement, the CN logo, which is the box with CN on each side of that surrounds the meal pattern contribution statement, and then there's an inspection legend. If you serve a commercially prepared food item and do not have a CN label on file, that meal is not reimbursable. The CN label program is managed by the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service. CN labels show the meal contribution statement, and this is a sample label which can be found in the Food Buying Guide resource. If you have questions about CN labels or foods, such as if they're allowable, how much you have to serve for a specific age group, and number of children, this is your resource to help you figure that out. They have an online tool that makes planning meals and purchasing the correct amount of food easy. So you'll want to check it out, the Food Buying Guide. Here are a couple of sample CN labels you might see on packages of chicken nuggets or corn dogs. If you serve these or similar items and do not see this type of CN label on your package, you are serving an item that is not creditable. You may want to contact the manufacturer for a product formulation statement or consider a different product with a CN label, or you can try making a homemade version of that food. As you know, using the ounce equivalents to credit grains is the new way you're measuring portions of grains in CACFP. We've provided ounce equivalent training as part of our annual CACFP training for the last 2 years, and we'll be sharing that information again with you now. We've also mailed resources to every provider participating under our sponsorship at least twice, and as part of your monitoring review desk audits, your monitors have emailed additional ounce equivalent resources to you. If for some reason you have not received the emailed resources, please contact your monitor or me. We would be happy to send the links to those resources to you again. Our goal is to ensure you understand and are comfortable with calculating grains using the new ounce equivalence method. This part of the training will answer the following questions. When do I have to begin using ounce equivalents? Why has CACFP switched to using ounce equivalents, and how will this affect my program? What is an ounce equivalent? How do I know how many ounce equivalents to serve to each age group in my program? How do I know how many ounce equivalents to serve to infants in my program? And how do I know how much of a grain item I need to serve? What tools and resources are available to help me? One additional note that I wanted to share with you regarding the ounce equivalents is that on January 1st, 2023, we were required to disallow meals when providers did not serve the proper ounce equivalent serving size of grains at meals and snack times. So going back to these questions, when do I have to begin using the ounce equivalents? Well, we've already answered that. We began using the ounce equivalents method for crediting grains on July 1st of 2022. So let's get started answering the rest of those questions. The CACFP switched to using ounce equivalents for crediting grains, and how will this affect my program? Switching to measuring grains in ounce equivalents is important because the portion sizes will be better aligned with the needs of the children, and portion sizes will be more consistent with those in other federal child nutrition programs. The National School Lunch Program has already begun using this method. Also, switching to ounce equivalents for measuring portion sizes of grains should not have a huge impact on your daily operation. It's just a different way to think about measuring. So what is an ounce equivalent? An ounce equivalent is a unit of measure that tells you the amount of grain in a portion of food. If you serve a 1 ounce equivalent portion of a grain food, that food contains 16 grams of grain. You'll often see ounce equivalents are abbreviated as OZEQ. One of the presenters at a training I attended on this subject reminded us that the foods we serve that contain grains often contains other foods, like eggs, some type of fat, sweetener, liquids, and sometimes fruits or vegetables. Think of muffins. With all of these other ingredients, how do we know exactly how much grain is in the serving of the muffin? Well, In the previous method, we were measuring grains in CACFP. We didn't know. But when we start using ounce equivalents to measure the grains, we will know exactly how much grain we are actually serving. Having a standard unit of measurement for grains makes sense not only because of all the additional ingredients in grain foods, but also because grain foods come in so many shapes and sizes. Look at this example. It takes 20 small cheese crackers to equal 16 grams of grains, or 1 ounce, and 12 thin wheat crackers to equal 16 grams of grains, or 1 ounce. But it only takes 5 woven whole wheat crackers to equal 16 grams, or 1 ounce of grains. This is because different grain foods contain different amounts of grains. Just think about how many small fish-shaped crackers it will take to make up 16 grams or a 1 ounce serving of grains. The USDA has created some great resources to help us determine how many ounce equivalents of different grains are needed for each age group at each meal and snack. Catholic Charities ordered copies of my favorite resource on the subject, using ounce equivalents for grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which were mailed out to all of our providers. And if you misplaced yours, you can access it using the link on our website under CACFP Resources and Forms in the Resource Center section of our webpage. Go to www.ccmaine.org/Child Adult Care Food Program. Using ounce equivalents for grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program is designed to pick it up and really get started, but it also clearly explains how to use the charts to determine the serving sizes of grains to offer to the children in care. It'll absolutely be something that you'll want to keep on hand in the kitchen. 2 through 4 of using ounce equivalents for grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program lists over 40 common grain items listed in alphabetical order to serve children in programs, and the minimum serving size required for each age group 1 year and older. If you're serving children between 1 to 5 years old at snack, you can see you must serve a minimum of a half-ounce equivalent and 1 ounce equivalent to children 6 to 18 years. The grain items are listed vertically along the left column with the description and the weight in grams. You'll need to look at your nutrition label to make sure you're serving the same size item. Grain item, you will see the amount of the item you need to serve to make the half-ounce equivalent and the 1 ounce equivalent serving of grains. If you're serving a mini bagel that is at least 28 grams according to the nutrition label on your product, you would need to serve half of the entire mini bagel, or 14 grams for a child 1 to 5 years old. If you're serving the same mini bagel for a child 6 to 8 years old, you would need to offer 1 entire mini bagel, or 28 grams, to meet the minimum serving size. That's not so hard, right? If you're serving infants in your program, the USDA has created the Feeding Infants Using Ounce Equivalents for Grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Just like the first resource, this also tells you exactly how many ounce equivalents to serve older infants who are developmentally ready for solid foods. A link for feeding infants using ounce equivalents for grains in the Child and Adult Care Food Program will also be found on our website for your easy access. If you're serving infants, you know there is a serving size range starting with 0 tablespoons to account for the different stages of an infant's developmental readiness. It's the same for ounce equivalents. The range will start with 0 ounce equivalent going up to a half ounce equivalent. So for an infant who is developmentally ready, you would serve 0 to a half ounce equivalent of iron fortified infant cereal at breakfast, lunch, dinner, or any snack. You can also see the requirement for the other grain items, such as bread-like items, crackers, and ready-to-eat cereal, creditable as snack only. How much of a grain item you need to serve to any age group, you can use the grain measuring chart for the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which we just looked at. You can also use the Food Buying Guide's Exhibit A Grains tool, or use the calculation method. The second option for determining how much of a grain should be served for the different age groups is using the USDA's Food Buying Guide Exhibit A Grains tool. You can access the Food Buying Guide by going to foodbuyingguide.fns.usda.gov/home/home. You'll be asked to create a login account, which will allow you to save your calculations for future use, or you can log in as a guest. Once there, click on Exhibit A Grains tool to get started. It's a nice training tutorial video on how to use the Exhibit A Grains tool that can be found under the Help section of the online food buying guide. The calculation method is the third way to determine how many grains to serve different age groups, and the USDA has another nice resource to explain this method using a little bit of math, and we'll look at that now. This would be used when you cannot use the grains measuring chart because your grain item is not on the chart or weighs less than the item on the list, or when you just don't want to use the Food Buying Guide's Exhibit A Grains tool. The first step in calculating ounce equivalents for grains is to determine the minimum amounts of grains you need to serve. You will look at the table in the calculations handout to find the age group of the children and the meal or snack you're serving. Let's say you're serving lunch to 4-year-olds. Looking at the chart, we see the minimum amount of grains required at lunch for children 1 to 5 years old is a half-ounce equivalent. Our second step is to look up the grain item that we want to serve on the grain ounce equivalence chart on pages 4 and 5 of the calculations handout. Let's say we want to serve savory whole wheat crackers as the grain at lunch to our group of 4-year-olds. On the chart, we first look for the row that shows savory crackers, and then we find the column for the number of ounce equivalents that we need to serve. In this case, we need to serve a half-ounce equivalent of grains to meet the meal pattern requirement for lunch for 4-year-olds. Looking at the chart, we see a half-ounce equivalent of savory crackers weighs 11 grams. We will have to look at the nutrition facts label of our package of savory crackers grain item in the third and fourth steps in this method. We'll write down the weight of one serving and the number of items or pieces that make up one serving. When looking at our nutrition facts label, we see that one serving of crackers weighs 32 grams and there are 16 crackers per serving. In step 5, we are asked to divide the weight of one serving in grams by the number of items or pieces in one serving. This will give us the weight of each item or piece. In this case, the serving of crackers weighs 32 grams and there are 16 crackers in a serving. So we'll divide 32 by 16 and we find that each cracker weighs 2 grams. Step 6 tells us we need to divide the weight of the ounce equivalent for the savory crackers that we found in the chart in step 2 by the weight of each item we just found in step 5. This gives us the number of items or pieces we need to serve to the children 4 years old to meet the meal pattern requirement. So if you remember from step 2, we found that a half-ounce equivalent of savory crackers needs to weigh at least 11 grams. And if we divide the 11 grams by the weight of our crackers, which was 2 grams each, we get 5.5 crackers. Final step and thing to remember with this process is to round up to the next whole number if the answer you got in step 6 is a fraction or a decimal. In this case, we got 5.5 crackers in step 6, so we'll round up to 6 crackers, and that's how many savory crackers we would have to serve to meet the meal pattern requirement for 4-year-olds at lunch. So now you have 3 options for crediting grains using ounce equivalents, and I don't think that was too difficult, right? One final option the state CACFP office shared during our last review was to let providers know they can purchase a kitchen scale that measures in ounces if they don't already have one, and simply use that to weigh the grain items to ensure enough is being served to meet the serving size requirements of grains. A final reminder is that you must keep any labels for grain items served until the end of each day, and this is so the nutrition and serving size information is available to your monitor, the state CACFP specialist, or a USDA representative during a review. Remember, each child care provider participating in CACFP must complete an annual CACFP training. You must also complete and submit the CACFP quiz as proof of that completion. Your most recent review and training documentation will be shared with your new sponsor, so please be sure to complete and submit your quiz by the deadline and definitely prior to transferring to your new sponsor. The letter and email you received announcing this training included links for this annual CACFP training webinar, a link to the state civil rights webinar, and a link to a short online quiz for you to complete and submit as proof you've met your annual CACFP training requirement. Your quiz must be submitted no later than July 28, 2023 for you to remain in compliance and to continue to be reimbursed for meals claimed. If you have difficulty accessing the quiz link, please reach out to your monitor as soon as possible. It's vacation time for CACFP staff also, so don't wait until the last minute to submit your quiz. Moving on to our final section of the annual CACFP training. Each year, childcare providers participating in the Child and Adult Care Food Program are required to participate in a civil rights training session to ensure we understand how the rules and requirements of the program and civil rights relate to one another. In the email you received announcing the annual CACFP training information were 3 links. One, to access this 2023 annual CACFP training webinar. The second, to access the Maine Department of Education Civil Rights Training for Child Nutrition Programs webinar. And the third was a link to access the 2023 annual CACFP training quiz. Please access and watch the civil rights training now, then complete and submit your quiz by the July 28th deadline. These next 2 slides are the federal and state non-discrimination statements. Feel free to pause and read through them so you know exactly what to do to file a civil rights complaint. You'll learn more about civil rights as it applies to CACFP participation in the state civil rights webinar using the link that accompanied this annual training announcement. This is the non-discrimination statement for the state of Maine, which shows how to file a civil rights complaint with the state. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you, your time, and all that you do to ensure the children in your care receive healthy, nutritious meals each day. It's been our privilege to serve as your CACFP sponsor over the years. Be safe, stay healthy, and know your Catholic Charities Maine CACFP team wishes you only the best in the future.